Happy Halloween, everyone, and welcome to First Shift, dressed up as E.J. Raddick. I'm Bill Pidto.
Do a pretty good E.J. Raddick. You do a pretty
like
good
like the costume?
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Happy Halloween to you, my friend.
Good to be with Stu Grimson. E.J.'s over in Finland getting ready for the Stars and the Panthers. And this being the first shift, you don't want to get benched early, so we got to come out of the gate, right? I mean, we got to.
Exactly right. And when you play the career fourth line left winger, Bill, let me tell you about the emphasis on the first shift.
Well, did you
make an impression early, or there's no second shift?
You were never part of the first shift, though, were you?
Well, my first shift as a fourth line left winger, But yeah, you're right. I rarely started.
All right, so it's great to be with Stu, and we don't want to bury the lead.
No, sir.
Our esteemed producer, J.D. Lindbergh, got married on Friday, and we're all happy to report that he's still married.
So far.
Yeah. Good for him. He's been able to keep it together for these 72 hours, JD.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a tumultuous 72 hours, but you know what? She's still waiting for it. We love you, Dan.
And of note here, JD has lost the baseball cap that he used to wear.
A freshly tightly
obviously,
shorn
his
JD.
wife has had a major impact on him already.
Yeah.
He's cleaned up.
He's cleaned up, and he presents awfully well, don't you think?
Yeah.
They took me to the groomers before the wedding. You know, got to show off the fresh cut.
Yeah.
We'll see how long that lasts, though. You know, there can be a bit of a downslide from here. We'll see if he gravitates back to that ball cap and tucking all that hair up underneath it.
And as the audience gets to know JD, he's a huge Boston Red Sox fan, so he's been really happy all day about what happened to the Yankees. I haven't seen JD so happy about what happened to the Yankees. Yeah.
I think that's why EJ's really in Finland. He was getting out of town so he wouldn't have to deal with me the day after the Yankees lose the World Series.
That might well be true. That might well be true.
All right, Billy, let's get rocking, man.
All right, let us move on here to first things first. And we got some games from last night that we want to detail and talk about some trends. First, Stu, we have the Kings beating the Golden Knights last night 6-3. Andrei Kopitar for LA, 1 goal, 2 assists. In this game, he recorded his 800th career assist. And Kevin Fiala, who was benched from the last game after missing a team meeting, 1 goal and 1 assist. And the Kings now 6-3-2.
Yeah, this is an interesting team out of the gate. You know, I think the first point to kind of pick up on, a really road-heavy schedule to start the year, and the Kings often do that. I've had this conversation with their operations department, Luc Robitaille specifically, of the Kings, and this group loves to be on the road early in the season. They would draw a straight line between, you're on the road a lot early. You're building your team building as you go. You're making, you're going through these challenges away from your home venue. You're drawing closer together as a group. They would equate that, club success in the Cup years like 2012, et cetera, to being out on the road in the early going. This club is really strong on that. They show well in that respect. You know, they're out of the gate in a pretty meaningful way, but they're a club to kind of keep an eye on.
Now their arena was being renovated. That's why they started the season.
I think that's the
7-game road trip. Over those 7 games, too, they went 3-2-2. You talk about team bonding on the road. Was that the case when you played? What if guys don't like each other?
Then you figure out a way to like each other. I mean, it's a place where, you're free from all the distractions that come at home. You are your own social, unit intact when you're away from your home venue, your home city. So you're forced to be together. And generally speaking, like, hockey players are really engaging, humble guys. You put a group of athletes like that in the same environment for a good stretch of time, Bill, they tend to come together, and team unity in a contact sport over an 82-game schedule, the chemistry, the friendships you develop, and the way you struggle together, those intangibles become very, very critical as the year wears on.
Did you find that you enjoyed these long road trips when you played in terms of a bonding experience?
Almost as much as my ex-wife did. Almost as much as my ex-wife did.
There you have it. They're doing this without Drew Doughty, too. I mean, of course, that's another big point.
That's the amazing part. It really is. Drew Doughty, of course, big minute muncher, high octane offensive guy, really solid defender. You pull a piece like that out of the mix, and I would say too, he is their spark plug. He is their identity to some degree. He kind of, is a leader in a variety of ways. So tough to replace a guy like that. But gosh, Brent Clark has stepped into the mix. First round pick from 2021. Not a whole lot of NHL seasoning to this point, but he really has fit into a top 4 role and been a difference maker for this group. He looks really comfortable taking on a whole lot of responsibility in the absence of a Doughty. I do want to circle back to Kevin Fiala. So the kid missed a team meeting. He
said his alarm didn't go off, his cell phone or iPad, the alarm didn't go off.
This has been a challenge for Fiala over his entire career. It's part of why, he's no longer a Nashville Predator, to be frank with you. But, he owned it. It's on me. I let my teammates down. He got benched for it. He actually was a healthy scratch the game prior to this one. So this is kind of his, show us what you learned, come back with the vigor. You got to appreciate where that comes from. He steps into this one, scores a beautiful goal. Evades a kind of a stick-on-stick check there from Jack Eichel and snaps one into the back of the net. But Kevin is a pure talent. I was a member of the Predators team, the organization, their broadcast team, as they drafted Fiala back in 2015, I believe this was. And the book on this kid was he's a player that plays, just good things happen to him. Plays happen. He keeps things alive. He's a really unique individual, a key cog in a rather high-octane LA Kings offense.
Got to work on his alarm, though.
Yeah, you got to
make sure it's charged, the iPad or the iPhone, right?
You might want to set up a second alarm,
right?
Just a fallback alarm, right. Just in case.
Or maybe the snooze function can be.
And in my day, you used to call down to the front desk too. They'd ring you in the morning whenever you wanted to be up. The wake-up call from the front desk. Yeah. I don't know if that service is offered anymore in your local hotelier.
Fiala bounced back up, had the scratch, and had an excellent game. All right, elsewhere in terms of first things first, how about the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Oh, God.
As they're now 7-3 after beating Colorado last night. They have done an amazing job here with no Steven Stamkos. You wonder, the franchise icon goes to Nashville, and they have not missed a beat at all.
Yeah. The interesting part of that, you're exactly right. So what they've done, I think, first and foremost is, from management on down, they have built a culture, built an identity, installed a standard for performance where that culture, and let's be clear, Stamkos has been a very important part of that. No more obvious a point made on this broadcast than, the captain of the team is obviously instrumental in kind of communicating that culture. But, even in the absence of a Steven Stamkos, that culture continues on. That culture continues to foster growth. And this team has really picked up essentially where they left off last year, and maybe even, are on a different, maybe more upward trajectory. But the one cog we'll have to mention right out of the gate on that is Jake Guentzel. And to me, this young man is just, he's really, really impressive. It's a difficult thing to replace a top 6, a dynamic top 6 guy like a Steven Stamkos. But look at Guentzel in this respect. He was developed, rode shotgun alongside of Sidney Crosby. In addition to Crosby's skill set, just think about how the players that played with and against him over time just praise, his approach to the game, his professionalism. So I think Guentzel really is a product of that. He's learned the game from one of the game's greatest in the modern era.
But the things that you talk about, Stu, Guentzel, is his intuitive feel for the game.
Yeah.
You can't learn that, though. You could play with Sid, can you?
I think you can.
Isn't that innate?
100%.
Isn't that a natural?
I think a lot of it is natural. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of it is natural. He comes from a hockey lineage. His father's a senior scout in our game today. But a lot of it is baked into the recipe. I would agree. But a lot depends on also the kind of habits, the approach you learn to the game as you become an NHL player. The point I want to make about Jake Guentzel is he demonstrates to us high hockey IQ in the following way. steps out of the only roster he's ever been a part of in Pittsburgh last year at the trade deadline, steps right into a Canes jersey after the trade deadline. He's a point-per-game player through the rest of the regular season. He's a point-per-game player and impactful through the postseason. And again, you know, as he transitions through the summer, signs with these Tampa Bay Lightning, he's a point-per-game player or better right out of the gate as he seamlessly slips into a, you know, that top-line spot. Kucherov on the right side and Braden Point down the middle. He's just high hockey IQ, highly adaptable. Even the best players in the game, Bill, will tell you it's not an easy thing to do to transition into another roster and then start to make accommodations, assimilate into the habits and a system that another team plays. To me, that's one of the most impressive attributes of Jake Guentzel is just the way he has seamlessly fit in since he left Pittsburgh, and you know Tampa's making great strides as a result. Kucherov is his own story.
So Guentzel had 2 goals. Kucherov in the win last night, 1 goal and 2 assists. Now has 9 goals. It's tied for second most in the league. And Kucherov hasn't fallen off despite all the changes to the roster.
You know what's amazing about Kucherov?
Are you surprised by that?
Not really, because you know, there's so few players in our game today where we can say they're capable of manufacturing offense all by themselves. Kucherov is that kind of guy. Here's the best way for me to describe it. Even in a Connor McDavid era, where McDavid is rattling off 110, 120 point seasons, even in a Connor McDavid era, Kucherov is a threat to win the Art Ross Trophy every year, and he did it last year with a 140-something point season. He's absolutely brilliant. But where he may not have the Connor McDavid speed, the Connor McDavid skill set, physical skill set necessarily, he makes up for, I believe, in what goes on between Nikita Kucherov's ears. He may be the most cerebral player in the game today, just in terms of the way he thinks it, processes the game at a really high level, gives off a lot of false information. Add to that, Bill, he's the best half-wall guy in the game today. That power play, one of the most dynamic in the league, largely because Steven Stamkos was there. Kucherov continues to drive it from that half-wall position. He's still got a really effective trigger man in Braden Point in that kind of bumper slot. But it all runs through the hands of Nikita Kucherov. Brilliant, brilliant player. Distinct from McDavid in a few respects, but I would say equally as impactful.
12 even strength points for Kucherov. So it's not like he's cleaning up on the power play. He's doing a lot of his work
good point.
5-on-5.
Good point.
All right, the schedule tonight around the National Hockey League, we have a total of 7 games. Here's what it looks like, and we want to focus in on the Kraken at the Leafs. Stu, each of these teams 5-4-1. Dan Bylsma, of course, back in the NHL as a coach, head coach of Seattle.
Yeah.
By the way, Montour, the talented defenseman for Seattle, wife, just gave birth to a baby girl, so congratulations to him. He had a hat trick in his last game.
Yeah.
Seattle's defense has scored 10 goals, most in the league, but no Montour tonight.
Yeah.
What do you think about the start of the Kraken and also about the Leafs, each at 5-4-1?
Yeah, both at 5-4-1. Which 5-4-1 do I like better? I think I'm more bullish on the Kraken, given the way that roster is built. And I like Dan Bylsma behind the bench. Of course, Coach Bylsma was a member of our broadcast team for a number of years, so we got to know him pretty well up here. And I've always known this about him, a real student of the game. He was kind of a ham and egger like me, but he made himself a real student of the game, and he's just a great, great communicator. You know, he was, his resume is complete with, you know, those impressive years as bench boss of the Pittsburgh Penguins under, you know, Crosby and Malkin, etc. But he's proven he's really capable at getting the most out of a roster, and I think the way he's got this group going in Seattle, I think they're capable certainly of more than they did last year, in my estimation, Bill. So it'll be interesting to see the way the Wings kind of take shape. I think Toronto's an interesting discussion to have too, because and Steve Koulias, you know, a weekly guest on our show here, kind of put this seed in our midst. You know, one of the surefire ways for Toronto to kind of slay the demon and go on a good deep run. He put it in this context. If they can finish first in the Atlantic, if they can avoid the 2-3 matchup in the Atlantic, which has really been kind of the bane of their existence.
Specifically the Bruins always, right?
The Bruins, exactly. If they can avoid that 2-3 matchup, maybe there's a more likely path, a broader path for Toronto to go on a good deep run. So that, for me, is kind of something to keep an eye on and kind of interesting context to look at the Maple Leafs in. But this will be a good one. This will be a good matchup. And, Seattle's no easy out. You got to be on your toes if you're the Leafs, even taking them on at home.
All right, so that's the first block of the first shift. I think Stu is deserving of more playing time.
Well, how about that?
And our producer...
I did something positive in my first shift. I think that's what that means.
You moved your feet, pucks to the net. You made the right play. You
keep it simple. Get it going in the right direction.
And our producer's still married, so that's even better news.
We got him on
JD, I hope you have a great married life. Much to come, including Dan Rosen with his Super 16 as he's going to rank the top teams in the NHL. We continue on First Shift right after this. We continue here on First Shift. Time now for the Super 16 presented by Enterprise. We welcome in Dan Rosen, as always, to break down his list. And Dan, just so you know, you got your wish. You've driven EJ out of the country. He's in Finland. He can't take the heat. He's not part of it this time, unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately for you.
Yeah, no, it's very fortunate for everybody. Let's be honest. It's not just me. It's for everybody. You guys included. He had to leave the country. He couldn't take it anymore. We know, okay, he's going to broadcast some games. But regardless, he had to leave the country. That's all. That's the story we're telling.
The heat is just so hot, the man had to leave the country for Finland, of all places. As I understand it, it's not exactly, they're not having the 70s and 80s we are here in New Jersey at the moment.
No. I hope he doesn't go trick-or-treating. I'll tell you that one. Nobody wants him to show up at their doorstep.
Truth be told, he's having some jet lag issues, Dan, so I don't think we have to worry about that. Trick-or-treating. All right, Dan, fire away. 16 down to what? 12 here to start, I guess.
16 and 13. We'll go with top 13. Bottom four here. Here we go. We have the Columbus Blue Jackets. Got to get them in. Got a nice 2 wins in a row. They're 5-3-1. They beat the Islanders, obviously. They beat Toronto. They lost to Toronto. They beat Edmonton. So got to get them in. The Predators got a couple of wins. I know they lost to Tampa, but they get in for me because they got a couple of wins, broke that 5-game losing streak. LA Kings, originally I wasn't going to have them in, and you see what they did last night. And you know what? They're Jekyll and Hyde, but they come on, and then when they're good, they can be really good. And the Colorado Avalanche, another one. They won a bunch of games in a row. I know they lost their last 2, but they really came back after a tough start to win 5 games in a row. So the Avalanche a little bit back in for me, but they're like all of these teams right here in this 4, they're teetering right now. But these, the Predators and the Avalanche should be higher. They just they tough starts.
I appreciate you saying the Avs are teetering. You talk about those losses, the 2 losses that the Avs had, Dan. They're Ottawa and Chicago. Chicago, of course, probably be a little bit more alarming. But, clubs I'm looking at, that might have been a basis for me as I look at your list to maybe knock Colorado right out of there for that slot at all. Yeah. And consider a Buffalo. Did Buffalo get much consideration for you given, wins over Dallas and Detroit in the past week? And their single loss was to the defending champs of all teams.
You know what? They didn't get a lot of consideration. I mean, probably should have more. This is the civil discourse we can have when EJ's not here.
He's moving in my direction already. I like this, Bill. I like this.
But they didn't. You know why? And Stu, I'll tell you why. Exactly why. Because you need to see a heck of a lot more. That's the thing, right? I mean, they don't have the pedigree. Nashville has a little bit more of it. Colorado has a little bit more. Columbus got to get them in. Listen, what a great story they've been at the start of this season, so I felt the need to get them in. But Nashville's got that pedigree, and Colorado's got that pedigree, and the Kings really do as well. So they get in for me. And you know what, Bill? It's tough. You can't have all these teams.
Yeah. Well, there's only 16 spots. I understand. I hear you.
It's a tough list.
Tough.
All right,
tough.
Dan. How about the next 4? I have a little bit of an issue here. Go ahead.
You do?
Yeah, I do. Go ahead, and then I'll weigh in.
Well, you see the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in. Nice win over Winnipeg. If that's a win over anybody else, maybe. Winnipeg had an 8-game winning streak, so they got a nice win there. It ended a 3-game losing streak for them. The Vancouver Canucks lose 6-0 to the New Jersey Devils. They also lost to Carolina. You see the Devils are ahead of them. But previous to that, they had won 4 in a row. The Devils won 2 in a row, 6 goals in each game. So nice comeback for the Devils after a little bit of a teeter. And the New York Rangers, listen, I had them at 1 last week, and EJ killed me for it, right? Well, it's the smallest sample size, right? Because we're early in the season. We're not yet in November, so you're looking at small sample sizes. And the Rangers, they lose to Florida, and then they got really handled by Washington. And they squeezed in a win, a 2-1 win over Anaheim. So Washington's been really playing much better. Florida's got to be in the top 8. So the Rangers have to get bumped out.
All the way down to 9 from 1.
Yeah, because you haven't seen the top 8 yet. I'm just pointing out.
I think we have to reassess your analysis here. I mean, the way
I can't get lucky with the Rangers here.
I know it's early, but 1 to 9. That's rough.
Well,
that's
Well,
rough.
and I mean, if anybody, you made mention of the pedigree. I believe pedigree was part of the last 4 we saw. Yeah. If any club on this board has got some pedigree, Rangers have been a perennial, tops of the Metro the last handful of years.
They have been, and they certainly do have it. But here's the thing, and EJ is not listening, hopefully.
Oh,
so
I doubt it.
He was, I don't want to say correct, but he might have been somewhat accurate in his analysis of me having the Rangers a little too high last week. And Washington took them down and Florida took them down. So maybe it was an overestimation for the Rangers from me last week. And maybe this is a market correction that's gone a little too far. But I look at my top 8 when we get there, and I see teams that I don't know how I knocked them out, right? So you got the Washington Capitals. Well, they just handled the Rangers really well. And the Capitals have just been terrific this season at 6-2. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they've won 3 wins in a row since that loss to Minnesota. You don't see Minnesota yet. You haven't seen them yet, right? Well, you're going to see them eventually. But the Tampa Bay Lightning beat Washington, Nashville, and Colorado. Carolina's won 4 in a row. They went out and they swept Western Canada / Pacific Northwest. And the Florida Panthers have won 3 in a row since a loss to Minnesota. They're in the Global Series now. The Rangers have lost 2 of their last 3 games. How am I going to have them in over those 4?
I know how you knock them out. I know how you knock one of those teams out. Washington, you look at the strength of their opponent, and then you take that pedigree point we were making about the New York Rangers, Dan, and you move those Rangers up into this bracket, and you take those Washington Capitals, who, I give you credit, they're playing some nice hockey, but they belong lower down, given the strength of their recent wins. 2 of those wins over the last week, I believe since you ranked these clubs last week, 2 of those wins were over Philadelphia. Not exactly the class of the league at this moment.
But they went out and beat the Rangers in a statement way. They won 5-3, and it would have been a heck of a lot worse if not for Igor Shesterkin.
Yeah.
That's why they're ahead of the Rangers.
That's a whole lot riding on a single outing. That's a whole lot riding on a single outing. But
again, Stu, we're looking at a smaller sample size here. Talk to me in a month from now. We'll have a much bigger sample size to go off of, and one single game won't factor in as much, but it does now. It has to now.
Drum roll, guys.
All right.
Dan Rosen's top 4.
Top 4. All right, I mentioned it. You got the Minnesota Wild at number 4, 6-1-2 start. John Hines, by the way, joined us on the NHL At the Rink podcast. Check that out. The only blemish was that loss against the Philadelphia Flyers, but 5 of their past 6 beat Florida, beat Tampa. The Dallas Stars, they've won their past 2, 3 of 4, like I said. Big global series with the Florida Panthers. I mean, hey, that's 2 top 5 teams for me. The Vegas Golden Knights would have been number 1 had they beat the Kings last night, but they did not. So they lose 6-3. That ended a 4-game winning streak. They won those 4 games, scoring 6 goals a game. And then the Winnipeg Jets, they did get their first loss, but then they came right back and beat the Detroit Red Wings 9-1 in their first 10 games. Got to be number 1.
The top 4 make complete sense. I will make this point with you, Dan. I think there's a basis to take Vegas lower and to push Mini higher. And it goes to, again, strength of the opponent. Minnesota's wins, since you last ranked this series of teams, are over Florida, Tampa, Pittsburgh. pretty impressive competition. Vegas's wins come over clubs like Ottawa, San Jose, and Calgary. And again, you note the loss to the LA Kings. I probably would have flipped those two teams or bumped Vegas down and Mini up were I in your seat, but I'm not.
Yeah, but he's saying if Vegas, Dan, if Vegas wins over the Kings last night, how's that?
They'd have been number one.
How's that?
Well,
with
number
Winnipeg,
one, it would have been a 5-game winning streak for them.
Yeah, but
okay,
Winnipeg's
so
only got one loss.
Yeah.
They do, but they're score the way Vegas, the power that Vegas has, the way they score goals. I would have had them at one. I just like them. I like the defense. I like the way they play. And then they come out and they didn't play well. Then so I jumped them down. But you know what, Stu? Because you're not EJ.
Because I'm not.
I'm going to tell JD.
Is that your?
I'm dressed up as EJ. Dan, you like my Halloween costume?
Is that your idea of a compliment? Because you're not EJ.
It is, absolutely. Let's flip 2 and 4. Let's flip 2 and 4 just to make Stu happy because we want to keep him around. We want to have this, good camaraderie, this good banter back and forth. It's been very civil. I like it. You're not EJ. So.
Can I ask this question? Have you ever flipped anything for EJ before?
No, never. Absolutely.
I am deeply honored, Dan Rosen, and this may just be a really momentous moment in first shift history. Yeah.
Dan, for record keeping.
We met one another where we're at. I appreciate that. We sought it off, and we settled.
Dan in a giving mood on this Halloween.
Yes.
For record keeping, Dan, officially, Wild number 2, Golden Knights number 4. Is that what we're saying? We want to be fair when EJ comes back next week.
Yes, for record keeping, absolutely.
Okay, so Mini goes to number 2.
Wait, you are changing the poll in real time here?
Absolutely, we can do this.
Right,
it's television. We can do whatever we want.
And somebody make me a promise. Somebody make me a promise. We're going to clip this moment and we're going to email it to our friend EJ Raddick.
JD, when you do this segment next week, you got to run this clip, right? We got Dan Rosen in real time changing his poll. I mean, this is unprecedented, is it not?
Not in my tenure here on the first shift, illustrious 1 month, that which it is.
Dan Rosen's stock, in my eyes, has just gone through the ceiling. That's just a really noble, a scholarly thing to do. I appreciate the discourse we've had on this.
As do I, and EJ is going to He is going to kill me next week. This is not even, I mean, like, I might have to wear some padding. I'll tell you that much.
You may have called down the thunder by doing it. I appreciate the gesture, but I do think you're right. There's a price to be paid for it.
Hey, Dan, as always, we appreciate it. Enjoy the Halloween tonight, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
All right,
thanks, Dan. Good stuff. Really good stuff.
Dan Rosen, Super 16, presented by Enterprise. When we come back, Chris Mason, the Predators TV analyst, going to join us to talk about Nashville after this.
Super 16 is presented by Enterprise. We're here to keep you moving forward, whether it's around the corner or around the world. Official partner of the NHL.
Welcome back to First Shift. It's great to have you with us. We got the Nashville Predators' first 5 games, all those big-name offseason acquisitions. They go 0-5-0, but since then, last 4, 3-0-1, and tonight they play host to the Edmonton Oilers. And we're now joined by Chris Mason. He is the Predators analyst on TV. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you. So what's been the difference here in the Predators' recent turnaround?
Well, I think the biggest thing, you saw the numbers that you guys put up there. They were still getting the shots on goal. They were, were playing decent, I would say, but they were awfully perimeter. I think in the offseason, everybody was coining the Nashville Predators of the winner of free agency and summer and all that kind of stuff. And I feel they developed such a great identity last season as a team that would compete against anybody. They would work extremely hard every single night. And then you add Stamkos, you add Brady Shea, you add Jonathan Marchessault. And I felt at the beginning of the season, they kind of had a vibe where everyone's trying to fit in, but almost like, hey, we got these guys. We don't quite have to go to the net as hard. They never lost a battle the last half of the season at the net front, on both sides. And I feel that the start was just everybody trying to feel it out. They've started to do a better job of that the last few games, but I still think the defensively they can pick it up a lot more. UC Saros has been a lot better. He's been, as Stu knows, UC Saros-esque, and Scott Wedgwood came in and played a good game. The goaltending's been really good, but they're still giving up a lot on the defensive side of things.
You talked about chemistry, and the one thing we noticed on maybe the offensive side of things in the early going, Mace, when you add a weapon like a Steven Stamkos, given all that he's created over the course of his career, it seemed to me like a lot of the forwards, a lot of defenders, whether it's power play or, or 5-on-5, it's kind of there's more deference. We got to get it to Stammer, and you're maybe kind of giving up good looks and good plays as you're trying to force, that aspect of the game. Are they kind of weaning that out of the way they're playing right now?
Yeah, that's a great observation, because Andrew Burnett said exactly the same thing. He said, you got Luke Evangelista. They wanted to start Tommy Novak. He's the guy that I thought should be the second line center. He's got the skill set. He's that type of guy that can hold onto the puck and distribute and take coverage and let those guys get open. But I felt no matter who was on the ice at whatever time, even on the power play, you have Roman Josi, everyone's trying to force it over to those situations, because I think you get the puck and, you're a young kid and you're like, oh my God, I got Steven Stamkos. He's a future Hall of Famer, legend in the game. You feel like you have to rush plays. And that's one of the observations that Andrew Burnett had early. And he really talked about, he said, once they understand that, like we all do in the game, that these guys they're just like me. They're human beings. They're great guys. And especially, Stamkos is one of the nicest guys you ever meet. And Brady Shea and Marchessault as well. But there was a lot of that. And you guys know that. You're passing up. You're in a great shooting area for a team that's going to shoot and crash the net. And you try to force a play, that one split second of hesitation, it turns to a great scoring chance to nothing, not even a shot on goal or something that's perimeter or bounces over sticks. I think that's coming out of their game a little bit, where they're starting to move around and kind of get over that. But that's kind of the honeymoon phase that they were in for the first 5 games for sure.
Chris, we just put up Stamkos' numbers through the game so far. 1 goal and 2 assists in 9 games and a -7. Overall, how would you assess his first handful of games with the Predators?
Well, I think 5-on-5 is the biggest challenge, because Burnett wants to find that right combination. He really wanted to keep the first line together of O'Reilly, Nyquist, and Forsberg. They were incredible last year. They carried the team. They were carrying the team early in the season offensively. You can go to that. So you want a 2-line attack, 2-headed monster, if you will. So you want Marchessault, Stamkos, and then he's tried to find that right center. Tried Novak a couple times, even moved Stamkos to center, tried Cole Smith to try to spark that line, Colton Sissons. So that's the one that they're trying to really get going. Then they split up. They slid Marchessault down and moved Stamkos up. So they're really trying to find that right combination. So 5-on-5, I feel before that second line struggle. They would because Andrew Burnett has a really complex system. And it took the team a lot of games last year. You could see it with Brady Shea a little bit. He's doing fine. He's a great hockey player. There's no question. But it's a different mindset. You almost have to forget all the instincts and everything, Stu, as you've been taught as a hockey player, come back in the defensive zone, don't leave the zone without support. But Andrew Burnett wants you to come back, and Roman Josi as a defenseman struggle with it too, because he wants you to move the puck, get in the forehead, get to the forwards, and the forwards anticipate possession. So you're kind of like almost cheating, but you have to anticipate possession. So Marchessault and Stamkos coming into this, it just, again, it's about that hesitation. It took them a while. It's still, something that they're adjusting with, is to kind of almost forget everything that you've been taught as a hockey player and just like blow the zone. And a lot of guys talked about that last year. And I think splitting them up is kind of helped the team. So you don't have 2 guys on the line with that hesitation. But they're coming right now. He's getting the chances on the power play, to your initial question. So the power play, the chances are there. If they weren't there, that's when you'd be concerned the goals will come. He's hit like 5 or 6 posts already, so he's going to fill up the net at some point.
Mace, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about, the position you carved out a formidable NHL career playing. Maybe a 2-parter. What's UC Saros' game look like at this point? And then what do you see kind of in the newly formed, this is new for Nashville this year, a Wedgwood-Saros combination? How's that shaping up so far?
I think Saros has always been kind of a perennial slow starter, and he came to camp this season. And I thought last year, and this is some of the stuff I'm sure you guys talk about, but a lot of people on the outside think, oh, you're a hockey player, you're making a lot of money, nothing should affect you. And I think last season, this was the last year of his deal. You had Yaroslav Askarov in the minors, who's one of the best goalie prospects out there. There was a lot of talk in Nashville about what are they going to do next season? Is this a rebuild? Well, if you're rebuilding, then Askarov should come up and, you could trade Saros and get some assets. So I think that affected him. I think he had probably the most, I would say, up and down year that I've seen him have. He was great at the end of the year when they really, the team hunkered down and, you needed him to be UC Saros. But this season, I think I felt like he came in, he was clear of that. He was incredible at training camp and exhibition, which doesn't really mean anything, but he got hurt in the last exhibition game. So I think he started out a little bit slow. He got a little bit of a setback there. He had a lower body injury, but I think now he's back to 100%. And this is the best I've seen him in the last few games at the start of a season. Usually he's like a second half guy and he just gets on a tear. But he's been good. And Wedgwood coming in, he's coming in. I know how that is. You go in and Stu, as well. You go in a new team. You're like, well, I know they know who I am, but you got to prove yourself to your teammates. So, he had a tough preseason. He had a decent first game, and finally he got a big win. So I think he really feels a lot better that he's solidified, himself with, part of the boys and part of the team, and you got to contribute and all that. But I think goaltending, with this team, like any team, I think has always been a strength, and I see no reason why it won't be this year.
Chris, in the last 3 games, it's kind of wild. In each of the last 3 games, the Preds have trailed 2-0, and in those 3 games, the record is 2-0-1. What do you make of that?
Well, if you watch any of these games, this is the part that concerns me, which I also think is correctable. They're giving up odd man rushes left and right. It's crazy. It's not from a lack of trying. It's from a lack of maybe cohesiveness or just almost trying too hard. Sometimes you get 3 guys caught down low, trying to get on the forecheck, and then you have the D-man pinch. All of a sudden, you got a 3-on-1. The defensive side of things, that's the part where that has me concerned because, we all talk about it doesn't matter if you're getting points in October or you're getting points in April or March or whatever, they're all the same. And I feel like they've kind of given up a few points here early because of that, because of the defensive deficiency. So that would be the area that I think they have to really sort out quickly because they're getting chances. They're starting to score goals. They're going to score a bunch of goals. I think this year they'll be a good offensive team. I think the power play will end up being, in the top 10 maybe. They've got that type of a skill level that they should be in that range. But 5-on-5 is what defensively just hasn't been great.
All right. Hey, Chris, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right. Predator TV analyst Chris Mason joining us. When we come back, scary stuff, scary starts on this Halloween. Why not? Welcome back, everyone, as we continue on First Shift. Highest point percentage so far in the NHL. You have the Jets, the Stars, the Wild, Carolina, and the surprising Washington Capitals. But this being Halloween, Stu, we're going to play what we call First Fright. Okay?
Say that again. Slow.
First Fright.
Fright. Okay.
Fright.
You want to make sure you make that clear.
Right.
Fright, not fight when you're talking to former
you got to
NHL ham and egger.
It was also a lawyer, so the verbiage is really important. First Fright, we're going to go over some teams that not off to the greatest starts, and how concerned might you be. Let us begin with the Colorado Avalanche. They are 5-6. You see the numbers. The injury list has Ross Colton, Lehkonen, Nichushkin is out, Drouin, and Landeskog. Okay, out of 5 skulls, how scared are you about Colorado?
On the skull scale?
Yeah, skull scale.
The skull scale?
Try to say that 10 times
We
fast.
came up with that in the production meeting today. I think we need to get a trademark on that because I think that's really
skull scale.
It's going to pop. It's alliteration, but you know what? It's advanced alliteration, right? You've got the first 2 letters working together in tandem.
It could be a precipitous verbal decline. That's an
on
inside,
the skull scale.
That's an inside joke.
Back onto the rails. Back onto the rails we go. On the skull scale, the Avs get a full 5 skulls for me for the following reasons. Oh, there we are. There's our first Fright skull scale right there. I like that. That looks good, fellas. The injuries you mentioned, concerning. I mean, you take these guys, Nichushkin, Landeskog, Jonathan Drouin, Ross Colton, Lehkonen. arguably 3 or more of those guys factor in your top 6 were you to insert them back in the mix today. So that's a lot of firepower to be without. You've got no concerns about this Colorado blue line, and maybe that's what sustains them through all this. But you know what? There's help coming, so that's a good thing. So why does it still get 5 skull scales? Well, these guys are out, some of them longer term. Landeskog may not return this year. It's really undetermined at this point, Bill. But it's Georgiev in the net for these Colorado Avalanche. It's been
his save percentage, .822.
Yeah, it's been really, really rough. This guy has, I think we've hit a low point in his career. He seems unable to kind of be a mechanic to his own game and steel himself in a way that stabilizes his game. You know, and we've seen this over time, the last handful of years, going back to Jake Allen's days in St. Louis when he was a starter. It might be time to do something drastic like pull Georgiev out of the mix, get him some work on his game, maybe even at the AHL level. I know that sounds wild to say that about somebody with his pedigree, but that is the single most important factor to why I rank this group, Colorado Start, as a 5 skull scale concern.
Georgiev, by the way, will be a free agent after this season. And this may not be the best way to go into a...
This is not your ideal platform year. Not at all.
Suboptimal. All right. How about the Edmonton Oilers, Stu? Connor McDavid's out 2 to 3 weeks with a bad ankle. They're 4-5-1. You see the numbers. Remember, last year they started 3-9-1. Right now they're 4-5-1. After the 3-9-1 start last year, they made the coaching change. I was talking to you before the show about the difficulty of playing so deep into June, right? You have the heartbreaking loss in the Cup final, and then you have to start all over again to just get back to where you were. You have to make it all the way to the Cup final and win it to do better than last year.
Yeah.
How big a mental challenge might it be for this group?
You know, I think that's a challenge for all clubs without question. But I think, you know, you make a great point, Bill, because I think the challenge that these Edmonton Oilers are facing right now is, and I don't know that they really have that experience, that maturity as a group to kind of get to this place right out of the gate. But, you know, the worst thing they could do is fall into the mindset, the trap of, hey, we went to the finals last year. We're pretty much an automatic to go to the finals again last year. No matter what you did in the prior season, especially for a group like Edmonton, you got to wipe the slate clean. You got to start painting that canvas all over again, start climbing that mountain all over again. You got to get back into good habits right out of the gate.
How many skulls for...
Two skulls.
Out of 5 skulls, you're only giving Edmonton 2.
I have some concern. I'm not completely frightened by this group. I think there's still lots of talent there. Hey, look, even without Connor McDavid in the mix, he looks like he's going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks. Even without McDavid, they are built in the following way down the middle. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, Adam Henrique. That's still some nice center depth. I know they're a little thin through their top 9 at present, but this to me looks like the kind of group that could kind of tread water until number 97, their captain, gets back. But make no bones about it. You pull the most dynamic player in the game out of the mix, a lot of folks have to kind of shoulder the load, take on some of the responsibility. And I will make this point. At the end of the day, the entire group, you know, this may be difficult for Edmonton because it's not in their DNA. You got to start paying attention to more of the details, the nuanced things in the game. Clean up the area in and around the front of your goaltender. Tie up sticks. For Skinner, make sure you're directing stuff that you see towards the deeper corners, away from the dangerous area. Pucks out and in at both blue lines, and just a whole lot more attention to detail. We've seen teams you know, survive through some really, really grave injuries, man games lost, by adopting these responsible habits. That's the challenge for the Edmonton Oilers, in my estimation, through the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Of note, over the next 15 days, the Oilers play 7 games, so maybe the skull number will increase. Meantime, the Bruins, our last team, through 10 games, 4-5-1. Out of 5 skulls, Stu, how scared are you so far about the Bruins?
I'm a little more frightened for the Bruins than I am of the Edmonton Oilers we just talked about. Less so than these Colorado Avalanche we talked about, but I'll give them 3 skulls on the skull scale for the following reason. it's really lethargic up front. Zacha, Lindholm, Marchand, with the exception of Pasternak, the top end guys, the guys that you're looking to for a lot of offense, are struggling to produce where these Boston Bruins are concerned. So that's a real, an area of their roster to kind of keep an eye on going forward. One of the bright parts of this roster this season so far has been that fourth line. It was Beecher, Kupke, and Kostelik to start off. They were producing at 5-on-5. They were outscoring their competition by a healthy margin. But, clubs will often do this. When you got players that are going well, you'll push them into other areas, other lines in the roster to get other people going. Well, the one thing they had going really well, the fourth line, it's the fourth line no longer. They're broken up and they've been plugged in to different parts of the roster elsewhere. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for this Boston group. Jim Montgomery's got his hands full trying to get the bees going in the right direction.
All right, so that wraps up first fright here.
First fright.
First shift.
Along with that skull scale.
Yes. And this being
background.
Halloween, hockey Halloween fun is next. Welcome back on this Halloween. We have Columbus GM Don Waddell in a Green Lantern costume in brightest day and blackest night. No prospects, free agents, or opponents shall escape his sight. Just don't fall and end up on the IR. Right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, you got to love it when your GM's getting involved, when he's picking up the Halloween spirit in this way.
Any Halloween parties from your days as a player, as a team, or experiences that stand out? I went as Herman Munster. Real stretch, real reach. I know. I appreciate you saying that or thinking that. Did you even need a costume for that? I'm sorry.
I know where you live, Pidto.
No, you don't.
I went as Herman Munster. I thought I would scare all my Hartford Whalers teammates, so I came out of the bushes. Like, it was really dark outside of the house where we had this party. And I'm trying to, frighten all these people. I thought they'd be really not a one. It was like everybody recognized me right out of the gate. Wow, hey, Stu, good to see you. Come on inside. Let's go have a drink.
Let's go have some candy.
Didn't scare us.
You don't eat candy, though. It's just salmon, right?
Just salmon. Yeah.
We have any candy?
Pretty much. No candy. No candy.
Great to be with you.
You as well.
Thanks.
Great show. Great doctoral. First episode.
Shift.
The maiden voyage. First shift.
NHL Now is next.